Aisha Afid, the ambassador from Pakistan for the Bridge. Today, I am immensely excited to host this interview as we have with us the beautifully talented Stephanie Barbé Hammer. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Aisha. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie. Stephanie, I would love to talk about your achievements and I would like to make my viewers aware about you. So, guys, Stephanie is a professor emerita of comparative literature. She is a part of the elite faculty in the Women's Study and Creative Writing in the University of California, Riverside. She's also a creative writing instructor in Inlandia Institute, Riverside, and Yoga House Theatre. Furthermore, she's part of the advisory board for the Writers Block Presents in Los Angeles, and currently she's serving as managing editor and prose editor of the Shark Creek Literary magazine. Also, I would like to tell you guys about her books. She has written Sex with Buildings, which is a collection of prose and poem. She has written How Formal, a poetry collection, The Puppet Turners of Narrow Interior, which is a work of fiction, Delicious Strangeness, Craft of Writing Magical Realism, and Rescue Plan, which is another work of fiction. In addition to all of these, she has published many scholarly articles and she has also contributed to the Bridge Volume 2. She was awarded with the Distinguished Teaching Award in 1999, as well as the Award of Teaching Excellence from University from College of Humanities and Social Sciences, UCR, in 2006. How are you, Stephanie?
I'm doing wonderfully, Aisha. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
Thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie. It is such a pleasure to introduce you to our viewers.
Thank you so much.
Stephanie, you are generously multi-talented. You have done so many things in your life. What would you like to say about being a writer?
Well, that's a wonderful first question. Being a writer is, for me at least, an honor, a continuing challenge to learn more, to read more, to meet other writers such as yourself. And it's a real joy to be in this amazing community of people who love the written word.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Stephanie, you have shown keen interest in twisting the folk tales. What would you like to say about that, as well as your other writing interests?
I'm happy. What I'd like to do is tell you and your viewers the origin story of myself as a writer. And this happens when I am 4 years old. And
Oh.
I am playing with my dolls in my room, and I know a little about a couple named Romeo and Juliet. I don't really know the story yet because I'm 4, but I know that there's a balcony scene and that Romeo is outside and Juliet is inside. And I think to myself, what is she doing way up here? Because they're going to get married. So she needs to come down. So, and I do not advise my viewers to do this. I threw my doll out the window. Hours later, the doll appears on the windowsill of my grandfather's studio because he lived 2 floors down. And my mother, who had very sharp eyes, saw the doll. And oh, did I get into trouble. She was very angry with me, and rightfully so. But I still thought, I'm right. That story needs to be different. Juliet needs to marry Romeo, and this story needs to have a happy ending. So that's kind of always what I'm doing. Ever since, for looking at a traditional story and thinking, what can be different? And how can things turn out better for the women?
I agree, Stephanie. I really think that this will entrust the readers more because they don't want to read the traditional stories again and again and again.
Well, those stories are wonderful models for us as writers. and as readers who are trying to learn how to go through life. They're wonderful models. They're very old. They've been told over and over and over again. So they're powerful in certain ways. But I think for us now, particularly writers living in the 21st century, we look at those old stories and think, how can they be changed just a little to make the story more relevant and more alive for us?
Definitely, that's a very interesting way to intrigue the readers more. And I think it is going to help the young generations to have a new perspective to the old folk tales. Stephanie, what else do you like to write? You have shown a very keen interest in magical realism. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, thank you. I would love to. I find magical realism a very interesting way to write because you aren't completely in the world of the folk tale or fairy tale, which is fantasy, magic, and all kinds of crazy things happen. And it's also not the world that we're in right now, that's very mundane and very expected. It's a kind of writing where you take that world that we're in right now and you insert one or maybe two impossible or magical items. And that's it, just that one thing or those two things. And then you see what happens. A wonderful example of someone writing in magical realism is Franz Kafka, who wrote a very strange but very fascinating long short story, almost a novella called The
Mhm.
Metamorphosis. And it's an absolutely recognizable European family world. The hero has to get up and get ready and go to work. He has to do, and he doesn't like his job, as many people don't. The one thing that's happened is he has been turned into an insect. And so that's going to change the entire trajectory of the story because of this one thing that has happened. And I find that a very interesting way to write because it pushes me as a writer to think, well, if this impossible thing happened, what would regular people like you and I, what would we do? How would we react? And it makes me write more and a more interesting story.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That's a very good point of view. And I can see that a lot of people are interested in fantasies, but they tend to find logic in it. And I think this is something which is really going to help them enjoy the material more. And as well as if they're writers, they can write better material in that scenario.
And fantasy is certainly a wonderful way to write. I read all kinds of, I've read certainly all kinds of fantasy novels. I admire people who do that kind of writing because so much world building is involved. But for me, I like that walking that edge of the real world and this other world. I like having those two just kind of next to each other, but not falling into one or the other.
And you have definitely maintained a great standard for that. Stephanie, my next question is again about writing, but it is more related towards women. We know that we live in a man oriented world, and in such a space, what struggles did you face as a woman, and what would you like to say about women writers in the man oriented world?
Thank you so much for that question, Aisha. This is a question and an issue very dear to my heart, not only because I am a woman, but because I'm a mother to an adult daughter who is also a writer. And I come from a line of women very interested in books.
Mhm.
Um, I was fortunate enough to have a very good education. I'm from New York City originally, and I went to a private girls' school and then to a private women's college. So I have great regard for higher education in women's community
Mhm.
because I think they're wonderful. Um, but despite that wonderful education, my parents really expected me and needed me to go out and earn a living. And the thought of my being a creative person worried them because of the financial question, but I think they also, I think it made them nervous in certain ways. Um, so I wrote privately for many
Mm-hmm.
years. I wrote creatively, poetry mostly, because poetry is wonderful and you don't
It
need a
is
time to write poetry. You can,
definitely.
so I wrote poetry for many years before I tried to publish. And then it was really through teaching and through encountering wonderful literature of the past that I began to think, maybe I'm going to try to write my own stuff and send it out. Maybe I'm going to try. And I'm very grateful actually to a student who was the editor of the student run literary journal at UC Riverside, who said to me, have you ever thought about submitting something to the journal? And I did. And it was published. And that was my first publication. So I will always be grateful to my student, who was a man, I should be clear, who encouraged me to submit something. So then I was off and running and haven't stopped till then. But there's a second part to your question that I kind of want to go through a little bit more. But that anxiety about being a writer and about being a good writer persists for women, and it certainly has persisted for me. And I've continually had to kind of keep on pushing myself,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when I've received rejections, and we all receive them. No matter how wonderful a writer you are going to have someone turn your work down. That's just how it is. And I'm so grateful to the people, my friends, my husband, who's been tremendously supportive of my work, and some very dear women friends who are also artists, some writers and some not, who've really, really supported me and said, "Oh no, you mustn't give up," and "Oh, that's that." They were foolish to to reject your work, which is a very loyal thing for a friend to say. They were perhaps right too. Who knows? But those friends have really kept me going and keep me going as a writer.
That's remarkable, Stephanie. Stephanie, you are such an inspiring woman. It is honestly, it's a treat listening to you. I am honored to have you with me right here. Please, I would really like to know about your upcoming project. There is so much going in your head. Please tell us about your upcoming projects. What is coming up for us next?
You're right. There is always, you're quite right. There is always a lot going on in my head. A little bit less now that I'm older, but there's still a lot. I'm working on two different novels and
Mhm,
and a poetry collection. The first novel is about a teenage girl who lives in Los Angeles, which is where I've lived. I lived for many years, quite wealthy. And as happens with wealthy kids, they look at their parents and think, I feel like I'm missing out on real life. They're living
mhm.
their very privileged lives, but what about the real world? And so she sets out on an adventure to
Okay.
learn more about the real world, and she learns quite a lot and ends up coming home. Like Dorothy does in The Wizard of Oz. There really is no place like home, and she finds that out. So that's the first novel. There is magic in it. There are some
Mhm.
spirits from the past who come and visit her. But otherwise, it's Los Angeles, it's freeways, it's people with surfboards, it's everything you'd expect from Los Angeles and Southern California. And the second book is shorter, it's a novella, and it's
Mhm.
about a train trip that a young woman and a young man who meet at the train station go on, where mystery upon mystery arises, and they kind of become detectives trying to figure out what has happened, in particular to an elderly man who has disappeared from the train, but the train has made no stops, so where is the man? So that's that story. It was very fun to write. It's told in multiple points of view, so I had to really do a lot of figuring out of who was going to say what. And so that is pretty much done. And then the poetry collection is very different. It's autobiographical, and it's about being a city person, which I am, and the experience of living in the country, which is where I live now. So that's what I'm up to.
I cannot tell you how excited I am to get my hands on all these books. I would tell you to please hurry up so we can have them right with us and we can read them.
I
That's
will.
really
Thank you.
Stephanie, I would really like to talk about Bridge as you have published in the Bridge Anthology Volume 2. What would you like to say about Bridge as an initiative for a creative writing venture for the young enthusiasts out
I am so happy. I have Bridge Volume 2 right with me.
there?
I am
Ooh.
so thrilled to be a part of this project, which I think is incredibly important. It's more important than ever because we live in this miraculous time where you and I can talk, although we're thousands and thousands of miles away from each other, but which is great. But we were talking a little earlier about reading and writing, but there's something about sharing stories and poems that is very intimate and very deep. And being able to share that kind of work seems to me to be crucial. I was talking to a friend of mine, my best friend from second grade, who actually grew up in Beirut. Um,
Mhm.
and I said, I'm going to be talking to a writer from Pakistan. And she said, oh my gosh, that's so fantastic. Um, we need these kinds of opportunities to talk to each other. And the story that you all were kind enough to accept in Bridge actually is based on a real experience I had of intercultural understanding when I was invited to the People's Republic of China 5 years ago as a visiting writer and professor. I had never been to Asia, any part of Asia before.
Mhm.
Neither had my husband. And again, we read about China, we see about China on television, but talking to people,
Mhm.
having conversations, it's a whole different story. It's just so much better. And
Definitely.
I feel a little bit like I got to go in the sections by the Pakistani writers. I felt a little bit like I got to go to Pakistan for a little bit and see the world through these writers' eyes. And there was something, there were many differences, but then there were also moments where I just stopped and said to myself, that's how I feel. That's how I feel about my mother. There's a wonderful story about a kind of a corrupt young man who suddenly realizes his mother has COVID and goes, "Ah, I'll do anything for my mother to be okay." And I love that story. I loved my mother so much. She's gone now, but I thought that's how I feel about my mother. Absolutely. And there were poems, particularly by a couple of people saying, I dream of change. I want the world to be a better place. I want there to be more peace, less violence. And I wept during reading a couple of, because I thought that's how I feel. That's how my husband feels. That's how we feel here in Washington State, way far away. But to find that commonality with people who are we're in evening, you're in morning, but we have the same wishes and the same desire and the same hopes for our world.
Definitely. I think it's profound that we can connect through the bridge. It's a collaborative space. Stephanie, talking about collaborative spaces, you have been a part of so many collaborative spaces. What is your take on collaborative spaces? How do you see collaborative spaces? Do you think it's a better part of your life, or would you like to do it separately?
That's a wonderful question, Aisha. Thank you. I can say right off the bat that I absolutely love collaborative teaching. Collaborative teaching is my favorite way to teach creative writing, and it's actually my favorite way to teach literature. Is
Mhm.
to is to have a dialogue with another writer or another professor, because it generally makes the other people in the room much more at ease, because they say, oh, these people are talking, so I can ask a question or I can offer an opinion because I see them being so relaxed with each other. So it'll be fine. And I think, coming back to the question of women writers, I think that's particularly important for women writers. I have a loud voice because I'm from New York, and we're a loud group of people. But I'm actually quite shy in a group. And I
Mhm.
talk to many other women who say, "Oh, I had this idea, or I wanted to ask this, but I felt strange. I felt shy about asking." I think creating that space where women students and women writers can say, "I'm going to ask a question. I feel comfortable doing that," is great. Now, as far as collaborative writing is concerned, I'm so intrigued by this new opportunity that the Bridge is offering, because I have not done that much collaborative writing. I wrote a kind of avant-garde experimental piece. Ooh, this was about 10 years ago with another woman writer that was very fun to do, but I haven't done a lot. And actually, I've been thinking, ever since that portal went live, I've been thinking, what would I like to put there? Because that would be an interesting experiment to do. I think it's a great idea, and I'm trying to figure out how to start.
I would thank you so much, Stephanie. I would like to tell my viewers, because I would like to mention it. Bridge is offering a collaborative writing portal where we can share our writings, which are not completed, and they can be picked up by other authors and they can complete it. So it is a collaborative work. Stephanie, I was having one concern about this. Don't you think that authors will feel intimidated, or they would not want to share their name with another author in terms of collaboration?
I think that's a good point. Probably, I think some authors might not want to. But back to fantasy writing, which you talked about a little earlier, some really amazing fantasy writing has been done by people who have written together. And I'm thinking of Neil Gaiman, and forgive me, I'm not remembering his very famous co-author. They're the authors of Good Omens, and Neil Gaiman writes fantasy predominantly. He co-authored this book with another writer, and forgive me, I'm going to remember when we finish the Zoom call 2 hours from now, I'm going to go, oh, that's who it is. But it's a fantastic book, and it's a better book than either one of them could have written by themselves. So I think that people are doing collaborative work, and I think perhaps it's actually the work that I know about is more in the domain of popular literature, but literary authors need to do it too. So I think we need to get over our anxiety and just go for it.
I completely agree with your point. I think it's a great idea to explore different ideas and see a total new dimension to your work.
I agree, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about some of the European avant-garde movements, like the Dadaists and the Surrealists. They did that all the time. They would write a sentence. They would do these kind of group exercises where someone would write a sentence and then just pass it on a piece of paper to the next person, and they would write a sentence, and they'd go around until the story was finished, and they were all the author. And it's really kind of an exciting way to write.
Definitely, I completely agree with you, Stephanie. Talking about motivation, you are a great teacher and you have abundant experience in the teaching field. Stephanie, please tell me, what sort of teacher are you in the classroom?
Oh, what kind of, I try to get students to talk a lot. I am not a big, although I'm a big talker, as you can see. I'm not a big fan of getting up at a podium and reading the lecture. That's not something that I do. I actually try to talk. a little bit at the beginning and then ask students what they think. And
Mhm.
I have a variety of ways of doing that. And often I ask students to write something creative in response to a work of literature, just to get them thinking about what they liked about what they read or what they didn't like. So that's something that I do. I also like to, if I'm teaching a very big class, I like to break students up into small groups, groups of like 3 people or even pairs of people, and ask them to discuss one. I give them a list. They can choose which of the 3 topics they'd like to talk about. And again, particularly for shyer readers and writers and students, sometimes talking to one other person is
Mhm.
easier than talking to saying, well, this is what I thought, to a big group. So talking to one other person kind of gives you the courage. And what I sometimes ask students to do is we go around the class and I say, please tell the class what your partner said. Not what you said, but what your partner said. And then, of course, it's very easy to talk about what your partner said because that wasn't your opinion, that was theirs. And so that can be a very nice way to put students at ease and then get the conversation going, because hopefully people will disagree, and they almost always do disagree about a little bit about something. So that's kind of, those are techniques that I like to use. But I think more than anything, as a teacher, I really want students to feel happy that they're in the classroom and excited about what they're doing. Because if they're excited about what they're doing, they will figure it out. They will, I can't give them the answer. They'll read more, they'll talk to more people. It's really all about that excitement and enthusiasm, it seems to me.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really think that this is such a refreshing point, and I would like all our teachers to note that down because when students are interested, genuinely, we are interested in the class where the teacher is as collaborative and she is as confident and she is giving us out all the opportunities to talk about ourselves. So that is a very refreshing point of view.
Oh, it's my pleasure to share what I've learned over many years about teaching. I think often teachers get nervous. And again, I think women professors are worried about, I need to be authoritative and I need to show that I really know everything that I need to know. And I think all of that's important, but I think it can take away from, well, wait a minute, we're all just very excited to be here. And we're also lucky to be here and to be able to learn together and study together. So I always love to come back to that feeling of really being blessed to be in the classroom.
Definitely. Stephanie, I cannot not ask you this question because I see so many people who are looking forward to tell a story. They want to say out something, as we were talking about the students as well. However, I am really missing out on the readers that we have today. And people are not understanding how important it is to read in order to write. Would you like to say something about that?
I think that's such an important point. And of course, we have this problem in the United States. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it can be a hard argument to make because there's so much. People want to watch YouTube, young people want to play video games, which is so not my thing, but it's big for many people. And I think the argument is that reading makes you more intelligent, more articulate, more able to argue a point and argue if because everyone needs to make to win an argument. Every person that you teach and that I teach will be in a situation where they'll need to convince someone that they are right, and reading helps you do that because you get a bigger vocabulary. You learn different ways of seeing the world and thinking about the world, and I honestly believe it enables you to be a more active and empowered citizen.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You have such a great experience in the writing field as well as in the teaching field. Would you like to give out some tips to our creative writers before we sign off?
Oh, of course, I love giving tips. Well, first of all, I think it's really important to write and to write something almost every day. If you can get up, depending on whether you're an early morning person or a late night person, or if you have a break, try to write for a little bit every day. I have students who work, who have children, who are taking care of parents, and who often say, I don't have a lot of time to write. And my answer to them is, well, do you have 15 minutes? If so, great. Set a timer and write for 15 minutes. Just whatever, just free write. Just write for 15 minutes. You don't have 15 minutes, write for 10. If you don't have 10 minutes, write for 5. Almost everybody has 5 minutes. And
Definitely.
it's amazing how much you can get done in 5 minutes. So that's tip number 1.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was a treat listening to you. I'm so happy that I got to conduct this interview. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Aisha. It's my complete pleasure to meet you and have this wonderful conversation.
I would like to tell my viewers before we sign off that we are joining in the collaborative writing portal as well as Stephanie. I will be seeing you in the discussion portal, right?
Absolutely, you will.
So there is something very interesting coming up, and I would really want all my audience to join us in our discussion portal as well as go to our website www.bridgethenations.com and join our collaborative writing. It is always great to contribute with writers. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can stay connected with us and get such beneficial information and meet such good authors. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you so much, everybody. We shall see you in the next episode.